Beware. Insincere apologies from leftists. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and as somebody who grew up in the far leftist, peak third wave feminist environment that was Seattle, Washington in the 1980s and 1990s, I have been around the particular brand of passive-aggressive, vindictive, dishonest, two-faced, authoritarian types of leftists that we seem to be getting into confrontations with constantly these days for my entire life. And I want to make a few predictions about what might happen in the coming months and years if we maintain the high ground. Many of the types of attitudes described in this video are discussed in my video, Feminist Teacher's Pet Syndrome, but the patterns of behavior are by no means exclusive to women entirely, and I think males in far leftist environments tend to learn to adapt to these strange authoritarian systems more so in adult life and utilize them to their advantage when it suits them. Regardless, this video is going to be an attempt to explain what a lot of people who aren't strongly politically oriented and live outside of massive authoritarian systems likely don't understand about the individuals that thrive within strict authoritarian environments with firmly written codes of behavior, like the ones that exist within the far leftist institutions of academia, social media, and government, corporations, a lot of places. There's a lot of far leftism institutionalized. You just have to face the music. You see, the people who excel in far leftist environments are pretty much exclusively not particularly talented people, nor are they all that intelligent, interesting, or even particularly hardworking in many cases. More often than not, these people succeed simply as useful idiots because somebody or other decided that they could do work or dirty deeds that they didn't want to do themselves, and the powerful person gave them a platform or position for that very reason. A prime example of this type of person would be the once mighty internet troll slayer feminist Lindy West, who grew up in the Seattle area around the same time as I did. I think we are exactly the same age, in fact, and we were both in the same exact Seattle public school system. Lindy West was always a shy, quiet, good girl growing up, which she admits to in the opening chapters of her rather dishonestly titled memoir, Shrill, which markets itself as the supposed diaries of a strong woman, but according to this reviewer, basically ends by talking about how big of a victim she is because people called her fat too often on the internet or something. And then ultimately, the mighty troll slayer ended up quitting Twitter anyway. Now, as far as feminists go, Lindy West was one of the better authors in that she actually had a dash of a sense of humor and occasionally made a few decent points about a few things early in her career. However, was she any sort of great comedian? Could she ever hold a candle to her contemporaries of internet humor like Rucka Rucka Ali? Of course not. However, being that Lindy West was born and raised an obedient Seattle feminist good girl, she had one powerful thing going for her. She knew how to make the people above her happy if she tried, and thus, she got her foot in the door as an intern at the far leftist publication The Seattle Stranger, which eventually led to career opportunities writing for Jezebel after a failed attempt at stand-up comedy. Now keep in mind, I don't totally hold her as some sort of tragic figure merely for failing in stand-up comedy, because how many people have actually succeeded in stand-up over the past 10 years? Can you name anybody at all who wasn't already grinding to make a name for themselves 20 years ago that has become famous in stand-up comedy now? No, my problem with Lindy West is the monster that she allowed herself to become when she was weaponized as a useful idiot at Jezebel, seemingly taking out her personal rage at all men after a lifetime of being a fat girl, with articles like this one, which is far worse than the headline if you actually bother to read it. Though Lindy West was always perfectly nice while writing her movie and theater reviews back when she worked at The Stranger, she undoubtedly long had this man-hating monster inside of her. I imagine she always hated straight men for rejecting her, thin and pretty women for being desirable to straight men, and even gay men she probably hated for their ruthless body standards, which is undoubtedly why she felt compelled to attack her gay male boss at The Stranger, Dan Savage, for fat shaming right around the time she moved to LA. You see, with that move to LA, Lindy undoubtedly felt that she was moving up in the world, which turned out to be true as she landed her job as a staff writer at Jezebel, where she would go on to publish several of the vilest, most sexist, and even most racist blog posts that fourth wave feminism had to offer. None of this happened because Lindy didn't have hate in her heart already. I'm sure she hated males from a very young age. But the thing is this. Lindy West is an authoritarian PC leftist game player, and she carefully hid her hatred and laid in wait until the time was right for her to bring her vengeance upon the masses, and even on her old boss, Dan Savage, because he works out and makes fun of fat people, so she was ready to throw him under the bus as soon as she got the opportunity, even though he essentially started her career by employing her at her first paper. You see, Lindy did all of this man-hating stuff when and only when she knew that she could get away with it, and continued to bully men with her swarm of Twitter followers. And the sad thing is this. Even years after the fact, years after Milo Yiannopoulos called her out repeatedly by name as being a dishonest provocateur that didn't even have the decency to admit that she was stirring the pot, she still has the audacity to fall back on the nice, innocent, good girl routine to promote her book.
Another layer of this trolling issue is trolls, they don't just troll you, they also constantly tell you that you're hysterical and that you're not really being trolled. So then I got really fixated on documenting everything. So I searched my name every day and screen grabbed every single disgusting thing. I mean, I have hard drives. Just I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
From my experience being surrounded by such individuals my entire life, these people don't change in adult life if this is how they have learned to behave. These people are weak on a person-to-person basis. These people could obviously never become victorious in a fair competition. They never strayed from the pack growing up, never spoke up when they felt like somebody was being treated unfairly by the group, but instead, they carefully waited for their opportunity not to be big fishes themselves, but instead, they opted to be a small fish at the head of one of those clouds of fish that tries to make itself look bigger than it is. That being said, it would have been virtually impossible for an overtly self-conscious, prudish, feminist good girl like Lindy West to ever succeed in comedy with rivals like Jim Norton, who she debated at one point.
What's your name, yelling girl? Talk to me. Gia. Oh, are you with a guy? No. Do you need money? Are you just making noise for no reason? What's that? And I love you. That's how easy it is. Someone's getting chlamydia.
Nor is she anywhere near as funny, fearless, and engaging as even Leslie Jones.
I was watching the news the other day, and the newscaster was like, if you see a mountain lion, do not approach it. I was like, who is this commercial for? This is for white folks. Black people don't mess with animals. We cross the street when we see a squirrel. You see the look in Alvin's face.
Thus, in order to make a name for herself after trying the comedy circuit against these types of people as a Seattle prude, Lindy West had to work the system and climb the ladders of the leftist blogosphere, where she sat in a position of extreme privilege, where she could write hateful articles like these, brag about slaying the peasants who objected to her bigotry on social media, eventually go on to play victim when she was ran off of Twitter, and then finally capitalized upon the whole story with book sales. And here's the thing. So far, Lindy has never even apologized for her misdeeds, and I don't think that she plans on it. I would bet that it's her plan to just keep going with her career in writing, continuing to publish more books and write for the oh-so-reputable New York Times indefinitely, where she'll hopefully never have to get her hands dirty in the trenches of the internet again. You see, these people don't make apologies unless they absolutely have to, and even then, most of the time, we'd all be fools to believe that these apologies are sincere, because these people have been raised to know that it's more useful for them to play by the rules at all cost, even if the rules are completely immoral, like writing for Jezebel and acting like you're advocating for any sort of justice. Jim Norton, on the other hand, had personal integrity, which is why he stood up and debated this censorship-loving, authoritarian feminist bully, and instead of calling her out for being a bully, which she obviously was, and I'm sure he could demonstrate by the time he had that debate, he instead approached the conversation about censorship in comedy in good faith, doing his best to explain why comedy shouldn't have any rules. And let me remind you what he got in return. He was stabbed in the back as Lindy weaponized the backlash she received from people who saw her lose that debate as proof that she was magically right the whole time.
I just, copied and pasted a bunch of them, and then my husband and I made this video where I just read them out loud into the camera, super deadpan for like 5 straight minutes. And then I put it up on Jezebel, and I was like, are you sure? Are you sure comedy doesn't have a misogyny problem? And you just can't argue with that. And I didn't even have to do it. They did it. You know what I mean? Like, they made my point for me.
But it proved that you weren't...
So let's bring this to Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, who testified last week in front of the Senate. I'll spare you the details about who he is and how his platform has seemingly always been relentlessly politically biased in favor of the corporate Democrats. Jack Dorsey admitted to shadow banning something like 600,000 Twitter accounts in front of the Senate. Finally. He claims to have made a mistake. I assume he wants us to forgive him. Being that I am one of those people that was shadow banned, I imagine that he wants me to forgive him. So will I? Well, that's a question similar to asking me if I'd forgive Lindy West for being the way that she obviously still is. You see, I was not just shadow banned on Twitter, but I was shadow banned during a period of time when I was having a hard time with my YouTube career for complicated reasons. It would have really been nice if I could, say, get traction with my new videos when I uploaded them to my Twitter followers. But for months, I had no idea I was even shadow banned. It didn't even occur to me. No, instead, only a handful of my followers ever saw any of my tweets, and this only changed just a few days ago when the Twitter CEO was about to face the Senate hearing. That being said, being that I do earn money here and have 13,000 subscribers and do take my channel seriously, as I am one of the only people that talks about what I am talking about, especially in relation to the gay male community, I want to explain to you how being shadow banned made me feel, and still makes me feel. Getting shadow banned is worse than being banned any day. And I say this because once you're banned, you at least know you're banned and you can focus your energies elsewhere. But being shadow banned is a bit more like ordering food when you're really hungry but too busy to make anything or walk to a restaurant, only for 2 hours to go by until you finally realize that they forgot your order and it isn't even coming. You see, when you're shadow banned, you're thinking that you can tweet, and about 5% of your loyal followers who already watch all of your videos can, in fact, see your tweets. So you keep tweeting, but like that horrible feeling of being hungry and thinking your food is going to come any moment now for 2 hours, you know something is wrong, but you don't take action to do anything about it. And you keep tweeting or waiting for your food. Now, I don't believe for a moment that Jack Dorsey didn't know perfectly well that he was doing this to people. I'm pretty sure it wasn't an accident either. I think he knew perfectly well that if he banned everybody that he didn't like, they'd congregate elsewhere, maybe on Gab.ai, and his Democratic Party-sponsored company would become obsolete even sooner than it already has become. And so he led us on, pretending like we were still able to use his services when he essentially knew that we couldn't. It was a move that was beyond low, and I think we'd be fools to ever forgive him for doing such a thing, because he's not going to change. I hope his company goes bankrupt, that we all move over to Gab, and that will be the end of it. Anybody who thinks he won't do the same type of thing if he gets the chance is an idiot. The same type of idiot that believes that Twitter would have succeeded as a business without endless help from the Democrats. Or the same type of idiot that believes that Lindy West is a published author because she is a strong, witty woman. I'm going to tell you a short story to finish this video. You see, I've brought up in a past video a story about a family with 2 children that a friend of mine used to babysit for. There was a little boy and a little girl, and in that family, the little girl was basically an evil monster from hell, and the little boy essentially had to just put up with it, because this was Seattle, and in Seattle, boys are bad and girls are good. The funny thing about all of this was that the little girl wasn't even favored by the adults, as everybody admitted that she was a terror. However, it was still far leftist Seattle. So if the little boy ever hit his little sister, even in self-defense, she could always cry and get him into trouble. And considering she was seemingly always terrorizing him from the stories I heard anyhow, apparently everybody just acted like her bad behavior was normal. Still, I always wondered what motivated her to be such a little demon exactly. But finally, my friend told me a story about an interaction which gave me a clue about how she was enabled by adults. The deal was that the kids were about 4 and 6, and the little boy was very emotionally attached to a particular stuffed animal, which was a monkey, and so, for whatever reason, the little girl decided to steal it and hide it from him. This prompted the little boy to cry for an hour or so, and my former friend, the babysitter, gave up trying to find it, because it was time to read a bedtime story. When she told me the story, this friend of mine, she highlighted explicitly that the boy was still crying while she was reading, and the little girl went so far as to say to him, "Joshua, be quiet while she reads the story. I can't hear." Well, sure enough, as it turned out, as soon as the story was finished and my former friend, the babysitter, mentioned that their parents were about to come home, the little girl ran, grabbed the monkey from wherever she had hidden it, and then proudly presented it to them as if she had found it for her brother just to be nice. He was mainly glad to have his monkey back to sleep with, of course, but he told my former friend that he believed his sister to have been responsible for the missing monkey the whole time. My former friend, who by the way is a vindictive, manipulative woman herself. Being that the parents were about to come home, and I imagine my former friend didn't want to deal with the stress of coming up with an appropriate punishment for the little girl, she instead opted to make a deal with the little boy. She proposed the following to him. Well, it does seem like she probably hid your monkey, but being that she was nice enough to give it back, let's pretend that it didn't happen and agree not to be mad at her when your parents get home. Being that the little boy was about 6 and didn't obviously have the mental capacities to argue with a full-grown manipulative woman, he apparently nodded his head and said that that was some sort of a fair thing to do. And so, like that, the little girl learned at age 4 that she could fake an apology, or worse, not even have to admit to a crime that everybody knew she had committed, and she'd just get away with it by playing the nice and innocent good girl routine. Obviously, she should have gotten in a whole bunch of trouble, and she should have been told that if she ever does something like that again, the babysitter will figure it out and the parents will be told. And maybe that type of thing would have happened to her if she was a boy, but gender dynamics are not the point of this video. No, the point is that many of these people are raised their entire lives to behave like this. And let me tell you, if you allow them to get away with it on your watch, you can always expect more of it in the future. Don't think almost any of them are ever going to change in adult life. And they're certainly not going to change if their careers are based around acting like this.